To close bins, hoppers and silos containing powders or granular materials, or to close conveyor inlets and outlets, slide valves are traditionally used in many cases. With the new dust-proof VLQ, VLC, VLS and VDI ranges, WAM has accomplished its goal of offering the market an industrial product with special design features that are achievable only through series production. Depending on his specific requirements, the customer is able to choose between 4 basic models available in numerous variations. The VLQ valve, with a square cross-section, consists of a 2-piece carbon or stainless steel frame which is partly coated with WAM's unique polymer composite Syntex or SINT, and a metal core sliding blade made from the same material. VLC valves correspond to the VLQ in almost every detail except for their round cross-section. The VLS valve is suitable for applications without head load. It is available in the same design as the VLQ, but unlike that model, has an integrated electro-pneumatic actuator. The VDI valve adds to the simple opening and closing function the ability to control the material flow and to feed the product volumetrically within certain limits. The main innovative features of WAM slide valves are, in the case of VLQ and VLC, the valve frames, which are entirely coated with polymer composite Syntex or dry food grade FDA-approved SINT, offer maximum protection of the material being handled. The all-round dust-proof seal lips, which are incorporated in the polymer coating, ensure 100% safe sealing without any additional measures. The sliding blades, which are fully coated with a different version of the polymer composite Syntex or SINT, guarantee low-friction operation. The small number of parts make dismantling and reassembly of the valve an easy job. In the case of VLS, in addition to the features of the other models, the VLS has the smallest possible overall dimensions thanks to the actuator assembly inside the valve frame. The VDI valve is innovative as a whole. Its inclined blade forms an eye-shaped aperture with the asymmetrically tapered inner body. The wider the eye is opened, the more material flows through. The further it is closed, the more the material flow is reduced. The inner body consists of a self-supporting cast made from WAM's polymer composite Syntex or SINT. The blade is made from carbon steel for Syntex or from stainless steel for SINT. The valve can be operated manually, electro-pneumatically, or by a gear motor. Intermediate blade positions instead of a total opening are obtained through position sensors and made visible by an external indicator. To enforce material flow at low flow rates, the valve can be equipped with an additional pneumatic shaker that imparts percussion to the internal body of the valve during operation. WAM slide valves are available in the following sizes. VLQ with nominal widths ranging from 150 to 400 millimeters. VLC with nominal diameters from 150 to 400 millimeters. VLS with nominal widths from 150 to 300 millimeters. And VDI with nominal diameters ranging from 150 to 250 millimeters. Should a client ask for valves with special dimensions in larger quantities and in reasonable batches, WAM is always ready to find a solution and to include new models in the present range. Production figures of thousands of valves every year guarantee high quality and an outstanding price-performance ratio. WAM's actuator range, including hand-wheel operated units, electro-pneumatic actuators, and gear motor drives, provides the ideal complement to the valves. Production at an industrial level requires quality control at each stage of the manufacturing process. Starting from inbound quality control, through laser cutting and robot welding, via final assembly and testing up to outbound quality control and packaging, as being certified according to ISO 9002 quality system. Quick delivery is guaranteed thanks to a large amount of stock at the WAM factory in Italy and at its worldwide subsidiaries. During the following part of this video, please pay attention to the special safety notices. On receipt of the consignment, check that the codes on the cardboard packaging of the valve, the actuator and the position signaling device match with those in the invoice and in the acknowledgement of order. Handle all material with care. For the assembly of the actuator, the valve blade must rest on all bearings. Upend the valve on a level surface with a polymer-coated part of the valve pointing downwards. Remove the frame guards. Introduce the spindle of the manual actuator into the central bore on the upper crosspiece of the valve body. Screw the nut screw onto the spindle by approximately 100 mm. Place the small washers onto the hand wheel support. Insert the fixing bolts from above. Introduce the large washers from below and fasten the nuts. Turn the hand wheel until the bores on the nut screw and those on the blade correspond. Introduce from above the two bolts along with the two large washers. Insert the small washers and screw on the self-locking nuts, taking care not to do this too tightly. Tighten the 4 bolts that fix the upper crosspiece to the valve frame. Check if the hand wheel drive operates smoothly. For the installation of the assembled valve, don't use bolts which are long enough to interfere with the moving blade. As soon as the valve has been fitted, fix the top and bottom guard. Put the valve on end on a level surface with a polymer-coated part of the valve pointing down. Remove the frame guards. Introduce the pneumatic cylinder into the central bore on the upper crosspiece of the valve body. Fix the cylinder by inserting the 4 bolts, spring washers and flat washers from below and tighten the bolts crossways. Fit the bush onto the rod so the sticker on the bush remains visible. Fix the bush by screwing on the nut and the lock nut without tightening too firmly. Slide down the rod until the bores on the bush and those on the blade correspond. Introduce from above the 2 bolts along with the 2 big washers. Insert the small washers and screw on the self-locking nuts without tightening them up. Tighten the 4 bolts that fix the upper crosspiece to the valve frame. Loosen by a quarter turn the 2 bush fixing nuts. If required, now mount the solenoid valve for the pneumatic actuator onto the separately supplied steel support and assemble the whole onto the frame. Ensure the levers of the 2 limit switches are in a right angle position so that after being fitted, the rollers face the blade slots. Fit the limit switches to the inside of the side frames using nuts and bolts. The lateral bores in the side frames serve as cable passages for the limit switches. Before installation of the valve, connect compressed air and main supply and check the function of the blade and of the two limit switches. When the valve is open, one of the two bolt heads activates the roller lever of the limit switch closest to the crosspiece frame. When the valve is closed, the same happens to the limit switch on the opposite side. If necessary, adjust the bolts. Never put your hands inside the valve between the blade and the body. Do not expose parts of your body to the compressed air jet. Electrical connections must be carried out by qualified personnel only. Before working on the valve and drive unit, disconnect the motor from the main supply. Follow general safety instructions. As soon as the valve has been fitted, fix the top and bottom guard. Introduce the actuator spindle into the central bore on the upper crosspiece of the valve body. Screw the nut screw onto the spindle by approximately 100 mm with a grease nipple on the nut screw pointing outside. Choose the drive position. Introduce the 4 washers and bolts from below into the threaded bores of the actuator and tighten the bolts. Turn the spindle by hand until the bores on the nut screw and those on the blade correspond. Introduce from above bolts along with the 2 large washers. Insert the small washers and screw on the self-locking nuts without tightening them up. Remove the central bolt and washer from the top side of the drive unit. Turn the spindle by hand until the key slots are aligned. Now insert the parallel key and reinsert the central bolt and washer. Tighten the bolt. Tighten the 4 bolts that fix the upper crosspiece to the valve frame. Tighten the bolts and self-locking nuts of the nut screw. Then loosen by a quarter turn the 2 self-locking nuts. The assembly of the limit switches corresponds with the instructions on assembly of the pneumatic actuator shown earlier in this video. Never put your hands inside the valve between the blade and the body. Electrical connections must be carried out by qualified personnel only. Before working on the valve and drive unit, disconnect the motor from the main supply. Follow general safety instructions. Don't use bolts which are long enough to interfere with a moving blade. The assembly instructions for the valve models VLC and VDI are identical to those for the VLQ type. Unlike the models shown so far, the VLS is supplied pre-assembled and ready for use. Please refer to the safety notice earlier in this video regarding VLQ valves with electropneumatic actuators. Since the polymer coating of the valve body also acts as a seal, don't use any kind of additional solid or liquid seal. Do not tighten the bolts between the connecting flanges and the valve too firmly in order to maintain the sealing properties of the polymer coating. Ensure that the tolerance and levelness of the connecting flange is within 2 mm. Make sure that the fitted valve is perfectly level. Avoid the combination of a round hopper or silo outlet flange with a square valve and vice versa. Strictly follow the assembly instructions for the actuators. What you should always remember: never operate the valve without material, as this would cause unwelcomed friction between the 2 polymers. Never wet or grease the polymer valve body and blade. When fitting the actuator, check from below that a 5 mm clearance between the blade end and the polymer valve body is kept in the closed position. This does not apply to valves with a full metal blade, such as the VDI type. The only part that has to be greased regularly is the nut screw of the CRG gear motor. This is explained in detail in the video on actuators. Otherwise, no maintenance is required. The only wearing parts of WAM slide valves are, in case of highly abrasive materials, the seals and the blade coating. As both are integrated parts, you just replace the complete assembly kit according to the instructions given earlier in this video. However, in consideration of the unrivaled price-performance ratio of this valve range, you could simply buy a new valve.
Yeah.